Hello and welcome to Fight News Now. I'm John Pollock. Coming up today, I'm going to be chatting with John Ramdine about the latest infraction involving Jon Jones and the law. We'll also discuss Christiane Cyborg Justino's UFC debut, which is now set for UFC 198 coming up in May, and who her opponent is going to be. Plus, we're going to hear from Top Rank founder and promoter Bob Arum as we discuss the 50th anniversary of the first fight involving Muhammad Ali and George Chuvalo. And TNA's Ethan Carter III will stop by to discuss an announcement that was made on Tuesday by both Impact Wrestling and Fight Network. That is coming your way. Stay tuned. It's Fight News Now. I am here with John Ramdine to go through all of today's news, and unfortunately we're going to be starting with Jon Jones, and it has something to do with the fight next month because I think people certainly have questions about it, but this is not a positive news item for Jon Jones. Yet another infraction with the law. This one, I mean, if you were to look at this in a bubble, John, he was pulled over in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the officer who pulled him aside cited him for drag racing, which Jones was vehemently denying. He has not been charged with speeding. He was allegedly, revving his engine at a red light and then took off as the light turned green. I think if this, much like the recent incident where he didn't have his license and insurance on him, if these were just isolated incidents, I don't think many would really pay that much attention to it. But it is Jon Jones, and the fact is this guy is on probation, and now news breaking on Tuesday that he has turned himself into authorities in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and as we record this, he is still in custody. This just over 3 weeks away, where he is fighting Daniel Cormier. And it's just this pattern that continues, John. And you just see that a guy that should be on his best behavior behind the wheel, we're not seeing that. And it just seems to be compounding itself.
If you go online, you can see the video of when the cops pull him over, and you can see that. The thing is, we just don't know what happened before Jon Jones was pulled over. Like you said, he denies that there was any type of drag racing. And again, I don't know what justifies drag racing. I think you have to look at the law for that. But he says no. The officer says, I believe you were doing it. He was revving his engine. He gave Jon Jones a slew of tickets. I think there was 5 tickets. You have to understand, just being a human being, anybody would be ticked off if they didn't do what somebody's accusing them of and then slams them with 5 tickets. It's not that. I think the public looks at the fact that Jon Jones has dealt with this type of thing over and over again. People don't believe you're dealing with an innocent person. You believe that Jon Jones is somehow at the root of all these problems. And you talk about the fight. I don't think Jon Jones cares. It's like, you know what? I've been doing all of this stuff in the past. I'm the man. I never went into any of my fights 100% prepared. I didn't work my butt off. I'm gifted. You look at the situation where he hits this pregnant woman and bails from the car, gets himself out of that situation. Most people would distance themselves from an athlete that, has that type of behavior. Instead, the UFC embraces this guy. He's coming back to the big show. Upon his return, he's fighting for a championship. So if you're Jon Jones, why in the world would you not believe that everything you do will work out just fine?
Well, he had the incident where he was pulled over, no driver's license, no proof of insurance. I don't know how that even happens. I've been driving a car for my entire adult life.
He just doesn't care.
I can't ever recall being in a car where I did not have my insurance with me, ever. Nonetheless, if someone really wanted to make his life difficult and push that was a violation of his probation, they probably could have fought that battle with Jon Jones. He escaped that. It was a $100 donation to an animal shelter. He's in court last week for that. The next day at midnight is when this happens, and it's just like, it's frustrating, I think, if you're a Jon Jones supporter, that you want to see this guy put all this behind him, and it's just, you put yourself into these positions, and people joke when he's asked, would you consider just having a driver that takes you around? That almost feels like the answer here, to avoid all of this stuff. Because, again, if this were Joe Blow off the UFC roster who revved his engine and was pulled over, it's a non-story. But if this ends up being a violation of his probation, this could be a serious issue for him. And I think most people that are looking at this objectively think that even if this goes through and he comes out unscathed, what's going to be the next issue?
That's exactly
it. It's becoming when now.
That's exactly it. And it comes down to Jon Jones having money. He has the UFC support. He gets himself into hot water, either his team or the promoters. They have to look out for their interests, so they do whatever they have to clean up the mess. Many people will say, oh, you guys are just this is completely overblown.
If this was on its own, I'd
Sure.
agree with that.
Yeah.
If this were just a story, I mean, it's still Jon Jones, but this is really a stupid issue here, revving your engine if that's in fact what he did. He was never accused of speeding.
That's so weird.
So it's just the fact that
He just doesn't care.
It's
he
just
doesn't
where
care.
you are under the microscope, you're on probation. All they said was just avoid any problems. And instead, it's like, here are 2 already. Are there going to be more?
I would expect so. I mean, it seems to be in his nature. He's a guy that, finds controversy, and, he is not afraid to, ruffle feathers. And you saw it. Like, he could have just kept his mouth shut. We saw the video. He asked the police officer if the police officer was recording. He said yes. From there, you're just like, yes, sir. Yes, sir, I understand. Those are the charges. I'll see you in court. That's it. Instead, he decided to verbally attack the police officer. And again, we don't know the backstory. We don't know what happened before. So, maybe Jon Jones had a legitimate reason for being so upset. But if you wanted to take the high road and say, you know what, I've changed as a person, I've got to look to this fight, I made a mistake, I'm just going to accept the penalty, pay these fines, go to court, move on and focus on the fight. Instead, he talks some smack, and now everybody is talking about the fact that Jon Jones is in custody.
And how this impacts the fight is the simple fact that as we speak right now, Jon Jones is in custody, meaning he is not training today, and Daniel Cormier is.
Sure,
so
but
I don't care if this is just several hours. It's time that he is not spending getting ready for a fight in 3.5 weeks.
Very true, but we've also, if you can go online, you can hear Andrei Arlovsky say that it doesn't matter because he wasn't going to be training anyways. He decides when he wants to go to the gym, and when he does, I'm not going to say it's a half-assed effort, but Jon Jones just does not seem to put the effort in that the majority of fighters, a male or female, at the highest level, seem to contribute and seem to work their ass off. He's an anomaly.
It was announced by the UFC on Monday that Chris Cyborg Justino, who had been discussed for that UFC 198 card in Curitiba, Brazil, is now officially set. It's going to be a 140-pound catchweight bout with Leslie Smith, who will be coming up and giving up a ton of size to Cyborg. I mean, you forget that it was Leslie Smith who had cut down to 125 in Invicta and then fighting at 135 in the UFC's bantamweight division. So size, there will certainly be a discrepancy, but this is also one where we've discussed before, you're putting someone with Cyborg who it's not an elite contender in the women's 135-pound weight class, and it's essentially a fight for Cyborg and putting her in front of the most people possible in May.
Yeah, I am stunned that it took so long, and I understand the UFC was working on putting this fight between Cyborg and Ronda Rousey together, but I just felt that Cyborg was a star on her own. Like, look at her there. That Charmaine tweet, Cyborg dropping her down to the ground. When Cyborg is on, you just have to show the fight with Gina Carano. I'm sure the UFC doesn't have the rights to it, but they have the Invicta rights, and Cyborg thrills fans. People look at her and they're like, wow, this girl is terrifying. You put her on Fox, you put her on pay-per-view, expose her to the masses, and you're gonna have an instant star. You could do what they did with George St. Pierre and Anderson Silva for years and years and years. You tease the fight between the two greats, being Ronda Rousey at the time and Cyborg. Even if the fight never happens, you get people talking about it and you create interest. This is an excellent matchup for Cyborg because A, she's gonna look very good because Smith can take a spectacular beating. And I think when you envision this fight, you think about it in your mind, that's exactly what we're going to see. We're going to see Leslie Smith take a ton of damage by Cyborg and probably make it into the second round because she has heart and toughness like very few.
The fact this will be at 140 pounds, does that suggest to you that the 135 dream that everyone has
Not
is
happening.
Anything?
No, so we talked to Cyborg when we were in Vegas, and she said after she cuts down, she said it's very difficult for her. She goes, she feels different. She said her brain feels depleted, and some people say, well, she has to lose the muscle. Well, that's like telling a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, well, knock yourself down to a blue belt. You have an advantage. That's part of Cyborg's advantage, just like the wrestlers in the past. They understood how to cut weight maybe not properly because many people say it's damaging, but they cut down the best way possible. Cyborg just doesn't want to go down that route, and I don't blame her. If she doesn't feel healthy, she doesn't feel strong, she wants to have an advantage, do it. And I think that if the UFC just lets her do her thing, many people are going to jump on board the Cyborg bandwagon.
This week is also the 50th anniversary of the first fight involving Muhammad Ali and George Chuvalo. Later on in the hour, we're going to hear from George Chuvalo as well as Bob Arum. And Fight Network has announced a global content partnership with Impact Wrestling, which airs here on Tuesday nights on Fight Network. You're going to hear from Ethan Carter III discussing that deal as well as his role with Impact Wrestling, all still to come on today's edition of Fight News Now.